Rules and Strategic Planning Committee to order. We have a quorum. We have 7 of us present today. Supervisor Frank and Rudersdorf are absent. So agenda item number 2, proof of notification. Ms. Dole, did you post this on the bulletin board downstairs? Okay, sounds like you did. That's great. I'll confirm it here in my mic. Agenda approval, looking for a motion to approve a 10-point agenda today.
I move to approve.
Okay, we'll do a motion by Brewer and a second by Seep. All those in favor of the agenda, please say aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. Agenda item number 4, public comments. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address the committee today? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, approval of minutes. I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the October 6th meeting of the committee. Okay, motion by Gentis and a second by Glassburner. Any discussion on those minutes? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, we have approved minutes. Agenda item number 6, ethics review. So I keep adding to the cover sheet here. We have an August section, a September section, and now we have an October section. And last month, what we did is we reviewed the headings for the 3 new sections, and that's on pages 2 through however far the cover sheet goes, 2 through 11. So you can see the new headings for those. We've got a new column for recommendations made by the committee. We looked at that last time. And then we made recommendations for the financial interest policy and definition. And we also made recommendations for a gift policy and definition. And you can all be forgiven if you don't remember those. So those are now the language that we approved in committee is in the far right-hand column, starting at the top of page 4, where it says October 6, 2022. So now there are 4 new cells in that column that have language that we've approved of. So today, we're going to start with nepotism. So only one county had nepotism in their ethics ordinance, and that was Crawford County. We don't have it in our current ordinance either, but we do have a policy in our employee handbook that applies probably, of course, just to employees about nepotism. So I'll read the Crawford County example first, and then I asked Mr. Langreich to pull up the employee handbook, that section. Were you able to find that? Okay. So I'll read the Crawford County example here first. It says, looks like there are 2 sections here. The first section says, no person shall be employed, promoted, or transferred to any department, division, or work unit when, as a result, the employee would be directly supervising or receiving direct supervision from a related person. And then they defined it under the second section. Related person shall mean spouse, parents, children, siblings, grandparents, grandchildren, father-in-law, mother-in-law, stepchildren, stepparents, and any person sharing the employee's residence. So the section in our employee handbook, what does that? Is it long? Bullets. Do you mind reading that, Mr. Langreich? Maybe just start reading and then we'll stop you if it gets to be too much.
Policy on nepotism taken from the employee handbook, page 19, section 9, starting with paragraph A. If a department head becomes aware that a person in a supervisory position in his or her department is a relative, significant other, or domestic partner of a subordinate of that supervisor, the department head shall immediately report the fact to the county administrator. B, any full-time or part-time county employee or supervisor must inform the person's department head within 30 days of the person becoming a relative, significant other, domestic partner, or a supervisor or subordinate to the same department of county government. C, relative means spouse, parent, grandparent, grandchild, child, brother, sister, niece, nephew, aunt, and uncle. Paragraph D, significant other means a person with whom the employee cohabits. Paragraph E, a registered domestic partner is defined as one who is registered either in the state of Wisconsin or employee trust funds. Paragraph F, applicants for the county positions shall not be hired if the employment would place the applicant in a situation described in a paragraph herein. Paragraph G, no county employee shall be assigned, transferred, or promoted if the resulting employment would place the employee in a situation described in paragraph A herein. H, the county administrator is hereby authorized and directed to arrive at a reasonable solution to the relationship described in paragraph A herein, while making every effort to have each affected county employee continue in his or her county employment. Then I, this subsection shall not apply to temporary, casual, or call-in county employees. Mr. Chair.
Okay, so it sounds like we already have a nepotism policy in our handbook. What do people want to do regarding the ethics ordinance? Do you feel like it needs to be stated in here as well, or are we okay?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Mr. Seat.
the definition of supervisor refers to an employee of the county.
Don't believe supervisor is capitalized, but it's not defined either, is it?
Does not, in paragraph A, it's referred to in a supervisory position, and then throughout the remainder of the section, it then is referenced as supervisor lowercase s.
Okay, so most likely a supervisor, not a county board supervisor, a supervisor of an employee is what the paragraph's referring to. Okay. Yeah, Ms. Gentis.
I think it's good. They had listed here, which today is more relevant, I think, of stepchildren and step-parents, and I think that should maybe be here because there wouldn't be blood relatives always, but it is a close compromising situation.
Yeah, it sounds like our language in the handbook might be just a little outdated too. I've never heard the word cohabits. I think cohabitate, I think that means if you live with someone without being married to them. I think that's what that means. But it gets a little confusing because, yeah, you could, the way they say it in Crawford County, any person sharing the employee's residence. Well, that doesn't have to be a spouse or significant other. It could be a step kid or
Could be a friend.
could be a friend,
Sure.
a roommate. It could be a roommate. That's right.
So, Chair, can you just remind me this ethics ordinance that we're working on? Is this going to apply, is this specifically for the Board of Supervisors or the entire county, including employees?
Generally, it's including both. It's including county officials and employees. And
Okay.
then we haven't defined those yet. And that's going to be one of our last jobs toward the end. But some of the language we've already adopted says official or employee. So if you look back at that last column, we've been that's how we've been thinking of it. So no other county addressed nepotism regarding county board members.
Right, and I'm just wondering, I mean, yeah, what would that look like? And do we want to go there? I mean, that's a pretty large then, because let's say you're a county board supervisor and your nephew works in the highway department. Would that then preclude you from being a supervisor?
Or being on the highway, the Public Works Committee.
Right.
Yeah, we already do have some adopted language about financial interest. And we defined financial interest as any interest which yields directly or indirectly a monetary or other material benefit to the county officer or employee, or to any person employing or retaining services of the county officer or employee. So if, say, you were on the highway committee and you had a nephew who was an employee of the highway department and they lived with you and they were paying you rent to live with you, I would think maybe that would have to be disclosed under this proposed definition we have further up. So there might be other ways to catch it with county board members rather than, saying specifically you can't be a county board member either at all or on a particular committee if you have a relative or someone living with you in one of these departments. It could get kind of messy if we jump into that. We already have a couple situations like that on the county board, although I don't know that the county board members are on the supervising committee of the relative.
But even by definition, a county board supervisor ultimately is I mean, we're policymakers, but you know, what does that mean? Are we in a supervisory capacity, you know, of anybody? I mean, not exactly, but like you could
It's
argue,
him. It's Mr. Langrick.
right? But then if he's our employee, you know what I'm saying? Like it gets messy.
I'm almost thinking our policy, we've already got this covered in our employee handbook. And I don't know that we need to do what Crawford County did and put it in our ethics ordinance.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you heard that, Mr. Seat, but Mr. Cosgrove is saying, could we just say refer to the employee handbook for this matter? I would, it sounds good to me. Mr. Seat?
Yes, I recall that in the past, this question came up with regard to a conflict of interest or a potential conflict of interest between a county board supervisor and an individual who was an employee of the county and who may be under the supervision of his or her committee or supervisory oversight committee. The opinion of the previous corporation council on 2 occasions was that unless an employee is under the direct supervision of a related employee, a directly related employee, family member, etc., that the issue is moot. The exception that was made there was that in the case of the employment of a department head, say for example a a highway commissioner, by a supervising committee of which one was directly related to the potentially hired employee, then that would be inappropriate, and the it would nullify the hiring process.
Okay,
So,
that makes sense. I think we get where you're going with that. Now we have changed our committee structure so that our
yes, I understand
committees
that.
are no longer supervising. Now we have the administrator supervising.
Yes,
So
that's correct.
I'm wondering, Mr. Cosgrove, do you want to make a motion to the effect of what you said? Let's get that on the floor and debate that, and then
Sure. I'll make a motion that we insert in this portion, refer to the employee handbook, and then whatever appropriate section of that handbook is.
okay. A motion by Cosgrove.
I'll second that, and then I have a question.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
in our current structure, then you're saying that then even though we're called like supervisor, it's kind of a misnomer. Like we wouldn't technically be in a supervisory position.
That's right. Yeah, and we can go back to our policy on the roles of county board members to clarify that. We have roles within that policy on management, and management would be like Clint and Barb Scott and department heads, you know, like those people. Whereas our role is not to manage employees except for the administrator. So
Mr. Chairman,
let's go with Ms. Gentis and then Mr. Seat.
I'm a little confused because I'm gonna go like with HHS, because they approve some of the hiring and firings, I'm sure, at their new employees at their committee meetings still. I'm not sure. And then I know that like we have supervisors that have spouses that work there and they're not on that, but if that comes to the county board where we're asking for a raise or a certain amount of money, that person would excuse themselves. Am I not correct?
Okay, I don't know the answer to the first question. Ingrid would probably know it better than you.
Yeah, no, we don't. I mean, once in a while, if it's like, for example, I sat in on interviews, the final interviews for hiring the head of HHS, but we don't we do not approve the hire. They inform us of.
And you're not, I mean, we used to sit in on the interviews we're not doing that anymore.
No.
And then the second question, I believe, in that example, the supervisor would need to, if they were voting on, say, a pay raise for a specific position that their spouse held, they would need to, under our financial interest policy, if we adopt this, they would need to disclose it there.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, Mr. C.
yes, with regard to the last point, as a matter of personal ethics, a number of supervisors, including myself, and I know Mr. Turk and perhaps others, have, as a matter of personal choice, have chosen to recuse ourselves in cases where the question of a raise or disciplinary action, whatever, would come up with regard to an employee who was related. But that was not a matter of policy, it was a matter of personal ethics.
Well, if
We
we
refrained both from the discussion and from voting.
and if we do adopt this as our ethics ordinance, that will become policy. It will no longer become an option. So
I think it's very good.
okay. Well, let's go ahead and take a vote on this nepotism policy that Mr. Cosgrove made a motion for. So all those in favor of that policy as stated, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. So thanks for having a discussion on nepotism here. The next one on our chart is privileged information. So currently, our ethics ordinance says that, and I believe this only applies to employees. We can dig out the ethics ordinance if we need to confirm that. But my memory is that this only applies to employees, that they cannot disclose or use confidential information concerning Richland County to promote a private financial interest. So that's our current policy in the ordinance. So I'm going to read the two examples we've got. Crawford and Sauk County have the same language. Their ethics ordinance says an official or employee shall not knowingly disclose or permit the disclosure of privileged information to any person not lawfully authorized to receive such privileged information. An official or employee shall not use privileged information to advance his or her personal financial interest or that of his or her immediate family. And they do define that in Crawford, Sauk County, privileged information as any written or oral material related to county government, which has not become part of the body of public information and which is designated by statute, court decision, lawful orders, ordinances, resolution, or custom as privileged. And then in Iowa County, their language, I don't see a definition for theirs. Maybe it's in there and I didn't grab it. But their privileged information policy is no county official or employee may intentionally use or disclose information gained in the course of or by reason of his or her official position or activities in any way that could result in the receipt of anything of value for herself or himself, for a member of their immediate family, or for any other person or legal entity if the information has not been communicated to the public or is not a public record. So does anyone, those two examples, does anyone have a preference for one of those two examples over our existing policy? Ms. Glassbrenner?
I don't necessarily have a preference over our existing policy, but of the two examples, I think that the Crawford example is more clear. Just on initial reading, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, Supervisor Fleming agrees with that. Anyone have an opposing opinion? Why don't we go ahead and, if you're comfortable with it, then one of you two make the motion, or the motion in the second, maybe?
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that I think that our current policy is not sufficient. What does the rest of the committee think?
I think it's,
You're on.
I
think
I think our current policy is, I agree with Ingrid.
that you think our current policy is what? You think our current policy is sufficient?
I mean, I think the difference is that the other two policies make a distinction beyond just promoting financial interests. They also say, like, don't disclose it if it has not become public information yet.
Mhm.
So that would be the only, I guess, difference.
I think that's a good point.
And I don't know that, why am I remembering? Oh, we did. Okay, we did adopt a closed session policy too. So this is just a refresher back in September. Because this is kind of reminding me of that discussion. The policy we adopted to be, again, put into the ethics ordinance when we proposed this to the county board. No county official may disclose any information discussed, debated, or acted upon in a closed session of the county board or its standing committees. This gets a little more detailed about privileged information. So there is a distinction here.
And
like,
what would be an example of a distinction? I mean, in what scenario? Yes, thank you, Mr. Administrator.
I would say that if you're, what's in there with closed sessions would be specific to a closed session meeting. If you were to come into my office outside of that type of a meeting and we were talking on some type of an information flow that came down through some other type of an organization that could be considered like a confidential type of a thing, then that closed session language would cover it. Said.
Thank you.
I don't want to get this more because I know you're going to get into more social media later, but I mean, disclose would cover social media and everything, right? Emails.
Any communication, no
Yeah.
matter the form of communication. I like how it says, I like how it includes officials in the Crawford County example. We don't have that in our current policy. They also expand it just a little bit, I guess, because they say advancing their personal financial interest or that of their family. So they do widen it a little bit too, in that respect. Okay, I'll go ahead and make the motion that we move forward with the Crawford Sauk County example and definition.
Second that.
Okay, second by Glassbrunner. So any further discussion on privileged information policy and definition? Okay, then all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Can I ask a question though? I just realized in the definition, or the example,
Yeah.
when you were Administrator Langreich, when you were giving your example, would that fall under that definition? Because this is kind of saying that it has to be designated as privileged information. I mean, I guess if you're saying it's confidential, would that be considered by statute, court decision, lawful orders, ordinances, resolution, or custom?
What is the question?
Sorry, that got in the weeds a bit. The definition, if we're saying, so you mentioned, like, let's say we're having a conversation and there's some confidential information.
Yep.
Would that fall under, I mean, they get really specific, designated by statute, court decision, lawful orders, ordinance, resolution, or I guess the custom would maybe cover that. Okay.
Yeah, the distinction again would be is if we're just relying on your closed session, closed meeting type of a language, then these things would fall outside that box if it was an exchange that wasn't a public meeting with a quorum and all those things. If it was just an exchange that happened in our office or in a parking lot or some other type of outside that meeting, this language wouldn't apply to that.
This language would or wouldn't?
It would not unless it's adopted as you just did.
Oh,
or as it's recommended right now. Because you'd be talking, if you're relying just on happening in a
we
closed
have, right.
session, then that's the context right there.
And I'm actually glad you kind of interrupted the vote because I haven't said anything yet about what happened with the vote because now I see the next section is immediate family definition and we should have included that. So let's read through that and then we'll just have, if we're all comfortable with it, amend that into the motion and pass it all at once.
Yeah.
So the definition of immediate family in Crawford and Sauk County is an official's or employee's spouse, children, stepchildren, parents, step-parents, or other legal relation who contributes more than 1/2 of the support of the official or receives that level of support from the official or employee. So if anyone's comfortable with that, why don't we just, if you could make a motion to amend to add that into the original motion.
So move.
Okay, a motion by amend by Cosgrove.
Do we have a second?
No.
I'll second with a
Okay,
question.
second by Jensis, go ahead.
I guess I'm getting lost here myself in the weeds. If we're not supposed to disclose it, why are we listing people? We're not supposed to disclose it to anyone. What is this point?
Okay, so if you go back up to privileged information policy
Yeah,
and the Crawford Sauk County example, the very last two words are immediate family. Remember how I said that they expand the definition a little bit to their immediate family?
yeah, but this is about privileged information now.
Right, but privileged information has to be tied to a financial interest. So you can reveal privileged information according to this policy, except
It's connected financially to something.
if it's connected financially to something that benefits you.
Not exactly.
Yeah, there's two different elements. One is,
Thank
yeah,
you.
there's two elements. The first is you cannot share the privileged information, and the second paragraph or sentence there then is, so even if you don't disclose it, you can't use that information to benefit somebody. So there's,
You're right.
You can't
As it
be
was
like,
coming out of my
by
mouth,
the
it didn't
way,
sound
you
right.
might want to bid on such and such, don't ask any questions, just do it.
Right.
Okay, so you can't reveal privileged information and
Can't help out your immediate family with the use of that privileged information.
yes, financially.
It seems to me if you, I mean, let's face it, if you have your doctor never goes home and tells your wife they saw you at the doctor's office. I mean, that's all privileged information. I mean, I know that's part of their code. So if it's privileged information, we're not supposed to be telling anyone. I don't care if it's your spouse or who it is. You're not supposed to share.
Only defining immediate family in the context of the financial interest part. Like it already says you're not supposed to give it to anybody, but then it's saying just immediate family for financial interest. I guess, according to this.
That's what I'm saying.
Your best
Mr.
friend.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Hold on just a second. I'm also looking back at our original, our current policy. That does not prevent the disclosure of privileged information. It's always tied to a private financial interest. So this is an expansion
Yes.
of the current policy that we have. So I just want to make that clear. So, okay, Mr. Seat.
yes, I think what Ms. Gendas was referring to perhaps has to do with the realm of HIPAA and private and personal information. Mr. Langrick can speak to this, I'm sure. Certainly, it is not appropriate, not legal for an employee or a county official, for that matter, to disclose information regarding the discipline or termination of an employee in most cases. Or it is certainly not appropriate for, and certainly those are covered by state law or the statutes that cover HHS or other human service programs. So I think perhaps that's what Ms. Gendis is referring to, the whole HIPAA and PPI issues, employment issues, and so forth. Those are all fall into a large realm of confidentiality that do not necessarily relate at all to a financial interest conflict.
The more we talk about this, the more I'm glad we're doing this.
Okay, but let me just
I think we
clarify.
don't-
HIPAA's not going to just cover any of this thing.
No.
This is
That's
HIPAA's
right.
only concerned with health information and businesses. Right, but I just wanted to clarify because he was using that.
Well, I was looking at the things listed in the definition when he said HIPAA. They say that's a federal law, but they say statute, which most of us think of as a state law, but is statute a federal statute?
Mhm.
It can
Well,
apply to federal too. It does. Okay.
yeah,
And
state
people are
law is
nodding their heads.
state law is aligned with the federal with regard to the disclosure of private and personal information.
So I think HIPAA would be covered by this definition, Supervisor Glassbrenner.
It would, but I'm saying that doesn't cover it's health information. So there's lots of other privileged information.
That's
that is
correct. That's correct. But those, may I speak, Mr. Chairman?
Let me just read off what we're defining here. We're defining this as any written or oral material related to county government which has not become part of the body of public information and which is designated by statutes, court decision, lawful orders, ordinances, resolution, or custom as privileged. This is a pretty wide net we're casting.
Yeah, that's a generalization, and the details are filled in by particular laws or statutes. I think that's fine. HHS operates under a certain set of laws and statutes. And all the statutes cover employment issues and hiring policies and so forth. Those are all covered in general under state statutes, and state statutes are now aligned with regard to the disclosure of personal identifying information and privileged information. Those are aligned with the federal statutes. The state statutes are
Okay,
aligned.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Seat. Okay, we got a motion on the table to amend the original motion with the immediate family definition. So all those in favor of that motion to amend, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No,
Okay, that motion to amend carries. Then we have now an amended motion that carries the privileged information policy definition from Crawford and Sauk County, the privileged information definition from Crawford and Sauk County, and the immediate family definition from Crawford and Sauk County. So any further discussion on that amended motion that's before us? Okay, all those in favor of the amended motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. So now we have a privileged information policy and definition along with an immediate family definition adopted. Let's maybe try to do one more, and then I think we'll have time for our comp plan and strategic plan discussions as long as this next one doesn't take too long. So this one is a public property policy. So we do not currently have a policy in our ethics ordinance about public property. I'm not sure if we have one elsewhere. Are you aware of one, Mr. Langer? He's shaking his head no. Okay, so Crawford and Sauk County, their example is an official or employee shall not use or knowingly permit the use of county services or county-owned vehicles, equipment, materials for unauthorized non-governmental purposes, or for unauthorized personnel convenience or for profit, unless such services or use are available to the public generally and consistent with practices and policies of the county. This should get a discussion going. Okay, so what do people think about that policy from Crawford and Sauk counties? Wondering about sheriff's deputies' cars. That's the first thing that comes into my mind.
yeah.
Supervisor Dentis just asked, they don't use those for private purposes, correct? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, it says, or unless such services are available to the public. I mean, unless they're doing some sort of like going to like a fundraising event or something, but it would still be for the public. So I don't know when the police department used their vehicles. Sorry. I don't know when the police department used their vehicles otherwise.
Well, I know that they're allowed to take them home.
Correct. I can speak to a couple of them in that. This is by no means a judgment on my part, one way or the other. But once the policy went in that each deputy was able to take their own vehicle home, there was some concerns when I was on the law enforcement committee previously of seeing a deputy stopping at the grocery store. Well, they're on their way home from work because they take their squad home, but it was a publicly perceived, this guy's just out grocery shopping with a county-owned squad. Not the case on his way home. Yeah. Same with dropping children off at school in the mornings on their way in or something similar.
So how did they solve that? Because it seems practical, but
Mr. Langrick?
And I apologize, I don't have the specific policy or procedures that we have for highway, but previous counties, different talking points that have come up that I've heard in allowing deputies to in fact use their vehicle for personal use inside the county boundaries, I think is how it was arrived at was, so if deputies were going to do that, they had to leave their radio on so that they could also be a response unit then and potentially be close to if something was going down. And it was also viewed that that would also be another deterrent of if they're on the road, you would have more presence in the community of patrol cars that are moving about. So again, just two talking points that I've heard in support of allowing deputies to use their vehicles within the county lines for more personal type use.
But that would kind of then, I mean, it might make it more difficult for somebody to say, drop their kids off at school if you're thinking you might have to respond to something.
Yes, it was in the context of if you can respond yet, if
Right.
your radio is still on.
Oh, so you could potentially use it without being able to have your radio on?
No, again, I'm thinking back, I think to this was how Clark County operated was if you're using it for personal purposes, it was within the county confines and your radio was on with the intentions that you are going to be able to respond. So, and I don't know the details on it, but then yes, taking children to school or having other people in the vehicle with you would
It would kind of
compromise
eliminate
that
that.
ability to be able to respond.
can I ask a question? I don't want to get so detailed here, but because I don't know anything about this part, but are they allowed to have anyone in the vehicle other than personnel and someone they've arrested? I didn't think you could ride in a vehicle unless, I think the DA was invited sometimes to go along. That, I don't know what the parameters are there.
Any of us could go for a ride along really at any point that you wanted to.
Any
It's,
citizen can.
yeah, any citizen can.
I didn't know that.
Considered unauthorized personal convenience. So I think it would be okay under this current, or under this definition.
What about the highway department? Are they allowed to say there's a snowstorm coming? Are they allowed to take a plow home and then plow from their home to their routes? Or do they have to go into the shop to get the plow? How's that work? Does anyone know?
To the best of my knowledge, we're picking up plow trucks from the shop. I don't know these things I'm not sure exactly what the department policies are. If there's a list of questions that you have that you'd want to know on our operations to help bring that information back and support on how you want to shape the ordinance, we can certainly do that too.
Well, I actually kind of like this language. I'm just wondering if we need to refer it to the Public Safety Committee
Yeah.
to have them, say, we'd like to put this in the ethics ordinance, but we want your input on it first.
Probably as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, I agree with that.
Okay, so maybe I'll make that a motion then to,
Mr. Chair.
yeah, go ahead.
One
Yeah,
second.
Mr. Cosgrove.
The only other thing I would couple with, for example, the highway department is some of the supervisors in that department, you will see their trucks. For example, Josh, if they're in that type of a role and they're leaving to go to a job the next morning, I've seen them take their vehicles home. Plow trucks, I do not believe, leave the compound without them coming to get it the day of the storm.
And to make it more complicated, I would say it's kind of the context too on, with this ordinance language, you'd be kind of talking to county-owned vehicles and equipment materials for unauthorized, non-governmental purposes. Then in reverse of that, then what would you like to, the department policies perhaps then define what is an authorized, non-governmental purpose?
And to expand on that is knowing what that policy is, so everybody knows, because what the public might perceive as work-related or not is something that we all might have to contend with from any constituent.
The other good thing to note is does Crawford or SOC have any definition somewhere of unauthorized versus authorized? Definition somewhere.
I didn't run across that. We do have their policies in the folder, so if you want to look at that right now and see if you can see anything, that would be 06C, the attachment.
Mr. Chairman, if you're going around the table, I'd like to have a chance when you get to me.
It's your turn. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Seat.
Yeah, I have to say that I think that we're complicating this a bit. You know, some of these things, we're almost looking at the trees and blinding ourselves to the whole forest. There's a myriad, I think, of exceptions in terms of management decisions. And are we imposing on management decisions here? For example, I can understand where you have an emergency in a tremendous snowstorm and the highway commissioner tells the employees to keep the truck at home and plow their way out of the driveway and onto the roads. I know that some townships do that. They have the patrolman, when there's a storm, take the plow truck home with him, plow his way out of his or her way out of the driveway and back to the town shop or to wherever they're going. Some of this stuff, I think, needs to be up to the discretion of management. And I wonder if we're micromanaging and imposing on management to some degree. Are we looking at the trees and not the whole forest here? There is a Bible full of state law and federal law with regard to all of these matters of ethics. And are we
Mr.
are
Seat,
we pretending to be lawyers here?
I'm going to stop you there. So,
That's fine.
authorized governmental purpose, the example you described, I would think a snowstorm is coming. The department head has authorized employees to take the plows home so that they can get out and get the roads plowed in the morning. So under this definition from Crawford and Sauk County, I think that would be an authorized governmental purpose. So I don't think this definition goes against what you're saying, what I'm saying is that it allows managers to make that decision. It even allows, say, Mr. Langreck to authorize Mr. Elder to take his personal vehicle home so that he can get to a job site in the morning. That's an authorized governmental purpose. The only thing I'm not sure about with this definition is the last phrase. So after the last comma where it says, unless such services or uses are available to the public generally. And I wonder if that just complicates it because we think, well, no one from the public can grab a squad car and go use it. No one from the public can grab a plow and go plow with it. So why are we?
May I give you an example?
Yeah, go ahead.
Many years ago, I was a JC. You age out at 40, so it's been a few years ago. But every spring we had the annual sandbox fill. We'd go around town in a truck filled with sand, fill people's sandboxes, sign up dad for the JCs. We wanted to use the village of McFarland's truck. Can we use it for this purpose? And I think the answer was no. But I think that's getting to this kind of use.
Okay, great. So what you just said, Chair Brewer, are you saying you like that phrase or you don't like that phrase at the end? Or does your comment relate to that phrase unless it's?
I guess it could relate to that phrase if it's a practice in the county of allowing trucks to be used for that purpose, but I would think then you'd have to have a driver and so kind of vague.
Yeah, the last portion of it. Let's see. Consistent with practices. So unless such services or use are available to the public generally and consistent with practices and policies of the county. So you're saying if the practice of the county had been to allow those public trucks to be used to fill up sandboxes for the JCs, then this policy would give an out.
Then when the Lions came to ask for that, then you'd have to say, yeah, sure. So, or you say no, and I think that's probably the direction we need to go. I don't know if there's ever been a problem here in Richland County.
Okay. Yeah.
Aren't we gonna forward this to those two committees?
Well, I didn't make a motion to that effect yet because too many people wanted to talk. I knew
Oh,
we'd have,
okay.
I knew we had to have a lot of discussion on this one, and that's good. I think we need to discuss this.
Yeah, because, well, I don't think I have enough information. I admire the police too much. I think they do a great job. I'm afraid to go in the car.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I would say the other areas that this could potentially get murky, just playing the devil's advocate here, is, for example, any of the equipment that we may have at the fairgrounds that could be used for personal use, if not covered under a policy. I don't know what all land conservation has besides the truck that is shared between two departments, or was. Different scenarios like that that we're maybe thinking only about the big picture, the sheriff's department and the highway department, but there's other areas in the county where there is equipment that could potentially be covered.
Cell phone use.
Yeah, computers, that's a good point too. Because I'm assuming we have a policy about personal use of computers on work time. Usually, yeah, Mr. Cooley behind me, do you know off the top of your head what our county policy is on that?
I don't know what it is, but we do. You can't, you're not supposed to use it for personal use aside from.
Okay, yeah, I think most organizations will allow some minor personal use, but not, you can't do it consistently or regularly, or they usually outline some examples of what you can and can't do.
See, Josh is on.
Mr. Elder, you're online. That's great. Do you mind sharing your opinion about how this might affect the highway department?
Okay, I just jumped on. I know there was, I was in another meeting prior to this, but equipment and personal use, is that what I'm gathering?
Yeah, so right now we're debating the idea of adding a public property policy to our ethics ordinance.
Okay.
And the language that we're debating is what Crawford and Sauk County have in their ethics ordinance. And it says, an official or employee shall not use or knowingly permit the use of county services or county-owned vehicles, equipment, materials for unauthorized non-governmental purposes or for unauthorized personal convenience or for profit, unless such services or uses are available to the public generally and consistent with practices and policies of the county. Mouthful. We're curious to hear your reaction. We're thinking about, no one's made the motion yet, but we're thinking about referring this to the Public Works and Public Safety committees, maybe some other ones as well, to get their opinions before we take any action on this.
Okay, what I would put in there, because we've done this before, county's policy, highways policy is we don't allow equipment to be used for personal use, no dump trucks or heavy equipment or anything. We do, however, allow them to use like small tools like a leaf blower or a hammer or something like that, or a chainsaw if they need to borrow it for a night. We usually let them do that. But maybe the language should be put in there that if they, like, special request has to be approved through their committee, like a policy, an amendment to the policy, because that's what we've done. Like our personal trucks, not a personal truck, but the county superintendent vehicles and the commissioner's truck, that's our truck day in and day out. But like we have it passed through Public Works last year, shortly after I took over, like we need to pick up our kids on our way home from work, no out of area kind of travel, but if it's, as long as it's within the line of going to and from work, we can pick up our kids and take them home with us or drop them off at daycare on our way to work, and so we don't have to drive clear home to change vehicles or something. Does that kind of make sense with what I'm saying?
No, it's good to hear. For me, it's good to hear the examples of what's going on. I think I still like the idea of referring this to committees, getting their opinions, and then seeing if we can craft a policy based on what we're hearing. And I'm sure whatever we propose is going to get debated on the county board floor when this goes forward. I have no doubt, especially this one.
Well, if we have the committee's input, hopefully, I mean, we need that. We can't make these decisions.
And I would think that'd be a good idea. Let it come down to the individual committees. You know, some of the ones that have a lot of equipment. You know, there is the fairgrounds that have a little bit, but like us at the highway, we have a very large variety of equipment. So it would be good to talk to Public Works about this.
You know, the county, I mean, we used to have a truck. I have to look what we do. They took the garbage everywhere, you know, all sorts of things. I think somebody actually took that truck home sometimes too. So we might want to check on that.
There is no garbage truck anymore. We haven't had one of those in years. There's only
it's
3
a-
trucks that
It's
travel.
a pickup truck that we took the garbage in.
For what purpose? What department are you talking
Yeah,
about?
the campus.
Oh, at the campus.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay.
And
All
it's-
right. So,
It's also versus authorized versus unauthorized. Who has the authority to authorize it? Like he's saying they let employees take like a leaf blower home. Well, he's authorizing them to do it. But who has the authority to authorize it? I guess should be made clear.
yeah, I agree. I would want to know in Crawford and Sauk County, how do they deal with that? Do they have any other information, or is it just kind of by, you know, a department head giving their employees the permission and no one really knows, you know, or how does that work? I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we forward this policy and ask for input from this particular policy to, gosh, do we want to do every committee?
It was just, you're micromanaging
Oh, Joanne? Joanne?
machinery and stuff, and it's like, come on, what?
Joanne Krulotz, we can all hear you. We know your opinion. Are there any committees that this group would not want people, not want to hear their input on? Should we just forward this to all the committees and just ask them to get back to us if they have an opinion?
That's my vote.
Okay,
Only because the campus does have equipment as well, tractors. Yeah, so
okay, so I'll make a motion to forward this policy to all the standing committees of the county. Does that sound fair? To get their opinion. So someone want to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Fleming. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed, say no.
I say no because I think we're micromanaging.
Okay, you agree with Ms. Krulotz. All right, thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next agenda item then. I think we've discussed that enough. We've made some people impatient. Okay, so agenda item number 7, comprehensive plan, scope, and budget. So at last month's meeting, we did the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis about our current comprehensive plan and updating it. So the results of that are shown in attachment A. So we have photos to show all those results. And if anyone wants to see any more detail, I believe that's by Ms. Dole's desk. Because the results of the SWOT analysis, the posters. Yeah, there's pictures online. You can't read all the responses on there, but if you want to see them, it's available in Mr. Langrich's office. So the largest strength was data. The largest weakness was implementation. The biggest opportunity for an update of the plan was existing and potential groups. And the largest threat toward completing the plan was money. So we, at last month's meeting, approved the development of a scope and budget. So what I did is I drafted a scope. That scope is embedded within a request for proposals, and that's in attachment B. And I'll walk through that in a little bit here, but I'll just walk through the cover sheet here first. So I developed that scope thinking about that SWOT analysis and what we came up with. And then I also found RFPs online from Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, Madison County, Iowa, and De Pere, Wisconsin. And so those are attachments C, D, and E. And then after I wrote that yesterday, I found out about a comprehensive plan in Cuba City, Wisconsin. And I contacted the economic development director there, who was the project manager for the development of that comp plan. and he sent me their RFP, which was attachment F. He said they had 8 responses to their RFP, so they had a lot of interest. So then I just researched I just typed in Google County, Wisconsin Comprehensive Plan Update, and several counties came up. So Bayfield County came up as a county that just did their comp plan update. They had their regional planning commission update it. That cost them $54,000. Cuba Cities was $30,000. They had a consultant do theirs. Their consultant name, it's in that last column. It's called Redevelopment Resources. Southwest Regional Planning Commission did Darlington's, or is in the middle of doing Darlington's. I don't think it's quite adopted yet, or it might be on the cusp of being adopted. That was 22 grand. De Pere, Wisconsin, that's a city of 25,000. They had a consultant do it for 80 grand. Dodgeville, Southwest Regional Planning did theirs for 32 grand. Douglas County, Wisconsin, about 3 times our size. They did, their regional planning commission did it, 60 grand. They got a grant from the Wisconsin Coastal Management Organization or grant program. I'm not sure what it is. And then I could just keep reading them off. There's just other examples. A lot of them are done by regional planning commissions. Another one that was done by a consultant was at the very bottom, Sturgeon Bay. Vanda Wall and Associates did it for 80 grand. So I don't know if we should issue an RFP or not. I only wrote it so for my job, I read a lot of RFPs. So I'm kind of used to seeing these. And I've actually never written one before, but I read them and respond to them a lot. So the way my mind was working, I was thinking, okay, if we issued an RFP, how would we do it? And I just started typing it out. And then the scope was kind of in the middle of that. So maybe I went a little beyond what you all told me I could do. And we don't need to do an RFP if the committee doesn't want to. The main issue we have to deal with is funding and how to fund something like that. Most counties don't do it internally, but some of the bigger ones do. So we could direct select Southwest Regional Planning Commission to do the work. They may be cheaper than a consultant. However, I look at Cuba Cities and they had a consultant and that was pretty competitive with the Regional Planning Commission. I know that sometimes the regional planning commissions will respond to RFPs as well. So if we did choose to issue an RFP, we could get responses from the public sector, from those regional planning commissions, or just Southwest Regional Planning Commission, or we could get a bunch of consultants too. Or maybe not very many. We don't know until we issue an RFP who would answer it. But typically, folks want to know what's your scope, how much money do you have, or how much money do you want to spend on this, or the scope and the budget are usually tied pretty close to each other. So I'm just going to walk through 7B unless someone wants to interrupt me. Any initial questions? So this is just a draft. I was trying to think about timeline. There's also a section in here. A lot of RFPs have a section, or the ones I was looking at for comp plans, they have a section on purpose and need. So that was kind of also helpful for me to think about, because I know we've talked about, well, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of it? So state law requires us to update a comp plan every 10 years. That's why a lot of localities are doing this right now. So that's in the purpose and need at the top of page 2. In our strategic plan, we set a goal of completing a new comprehensive plan by 2024. So the strategic plan is a roughly 3-year plan. The strategic plan we already adopted. So it's basically expected to be complete by the end of 2024. Did I read that somewhere? Am I getting that wrong? It's almost sounding wrong as I'm saying it out loud. So Clint can check me if I'm 2024. Okay. So really what a comp plan would do if we adopted it is it would take us through the next 10 years. Strategic plan is short-term, comp plan is long-term. So I listed out the results of the SWOT analysis and then said it was intended to inform decision-making and guide the county's development over the next 10 to 20 years. So then there's a community background section. I just wrote three quick paragraphs. Bob Simpson, I think his name is Bob Simpson. It sounds weird because it's someone from here in town, but Bob Simpson is the economic development director for Cuba City. He said he thinks it's great to really sell your community in the community background. So, you know, if we choose to do this, maybe that needs some more work. I haven't actually read his RFP yet, but I attached it. And then the scope of work, so that's at the bottom of page 3. I was thinking of like 5 different tasks. So 1, managing the project. 2, summarizing existing plans. I know when we started talking about the comp plan, people were bringing up, well, don't we already have this plan or that plan? And so we need an idea of all of our plans, I think. 3, updating the data. 4, engaging the community. And then 5, developing the updated comp plan. So then starting on page 4, I've described each of those in a little bit more detail. Managing it, I was thinking that, you know, any vendor would, they would work with our committee and probably on a monthly basis. And I wrote down that, you know, we do remote attendance because I think that will affect some of the cost estimates from consultants, knowing whether they have to drive here every time or they can attend remotely. And I laid out who would adopt the plan to the county board has that authority. And then existing plans, summarizing existing plans, I listed out several bullets of things I could think of. I'm sure I've missed some or someone will catch some additional ones. And then at the top of page 5, there's a section on updating the data, making it clear that we don't have the ability to update GIS data to do any of that mapping. That would need to happen by a vendor, especially since we don't have a GIS specialist right now. And then engaging the community, there's the state's law on comprehensive planning requires a written public participation plan, and that would have to be adopted by the county board before community engagement begins. So I put something in there about that. I listed out workshops, meetings, tabling at community events, and online surveys as potential methods that vendors could use to engage the community. And then developing an updated comprehensive plan. There's a little section on that about the 9 elements and coming up with goals and strategies, and that they have to be clearly put. I tried to use some of that stuff that we came up with for weaknesses of our existing comp plan to say, you know, it needs to be more usable. It needs to be implementation focused. And then at the bottom of page 5, I just started listing out some requirements of like things for a proposal. So there's just some ideas there. All this is very drafty, of course. I'm just giving you all something to react to. Then there's a selection criteria. Oftentimes RFPs they'll tell vendors, this is how we're going to rate your proposals to be fair. This is how many points we give to this element of a proposal and your budget and so on and so forth. And then I've got a timeline listed here. So I was thinking if we want this done by 2024, we didn't say in the strategic plan whether that was January 1st of 2024 or December 31st of 2024. So a natural breakpoint seems to be when the county board turns over. So if we could get this done by March of 2024, the vendors would probably have about a year to complete this based on what I'm laying out here, because we have to find the money first, get the money approved to do this. Then we have to distribute the RFP, and then you have to give the vendors time to respond. And that takes, you know, at least a month. I think I listed a month and a half here. And then we have our own process for how would we, you know, approve a proposal. We need a little time as well. So there's a couple other sections, but I left the budget blank because I don't know exactly what we should shoot for there. But at least we have some ideas based on other places. So just looking for some reactions and thoughts to taking next steps with this.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I would think that this is a natural function for Southwest Regional Planning. And depending as to whether or not we are members of Southwest Regional Planning, that would depend on the quoted price. I imagine it'll be more costly if we're not members, so, but they already know us, they already have most of this data. It should be less money.
Mr. Chairman, whenever you get around to me,
Go ahead.
I totally agree with Mr. Brewer. They have all of the history. They did the original planning, comprehensive planning for us. And I would think I would be in favor of dealing directly with them. They can do everything from developing all the data that's necessary to create a plan. They they had a lot of professional people involved in this. They do the public participation and all the rest. So I'm totally in agreement with Mr. Brewer.
Okay, other thoughts? Supervisor Jensis, go ahead.
I think they do a nice job. I think they know everything. I agree with Mr. Brewer about the data. I think that sometimes we need to have different eyes look at county. And I think they've been the same eyes for a long time. And I don't think we're getting a different perspective, so somewhat pedantic. So I don't know who else could, but I think maybe we need a perspective difference. That would be my only pause on it.
I did have a conversation with Mr. Maggie yesterday, and he filled in some of this information in the cover sheet about, he allowed me to fill it in because he told me the information about how much certain ones cost that they have done. He did say that I might be wrong here. I think what he said is Darlington issued an RFP, and the Southwest Regional Planning Commission responded to it and they won. So one option too that we could look at is issuing the RFP and encouraging them to respond as well. So we could compare them to the other options. Maybe there won't be other options. Maybe no one else will respond, but that could be one way to achieve what you're talking about without making a decision. What are other people's opinions on this? We'll have to decide. We should probably decide today if we want to keep this effort on track, timeline wise, unless you disagree with my timeline I got laid out.
I like that idea. I mean, I would like to know, would they really respond to that? Because I do really want to hear their proposal. I think we've had a good track record with them. They've been great working with us on the strategic plan and other things. So I guess my caveat would be I would really like to see them respond if we put one out. And also, thank you for all your work on this. I thought the RFP looked really good.
Yeah, no problem. Well, it's my job. I do this for a living.
Well,
So
you did it excellently.
you should get some results from that.
It's your talent.
Yeah, writing RFPs. Now, don't tell anyone else. Just for this.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should plunge ahead with this because we are on a time schedule, so we don't want to be left in the lurch here, so doing it now makes sense.
Okay, so I did recommend, I have some written language here as an idea, so maybe we should debate this and talk about it. A motion to adopt a draft scope and budget for an update of the comprehensive plan and refer the scope and budget to Finance and Personnel Committee for consideration of funding. And I was thinking from the American Rescue Plan Act. I was thinking that's the most likely source of funding that we're going to have for this. Maybe I should say RFP and budget, if you all are comfortable with that. I said scope and budget, but the RFP would imply that we're interested in going out to an RFP, going out for a request for proposals.
So we're supposed to put in, because you said how much we would go up to, isn't that defeat the purpose of an RFP?
That's a good question. So this is how it works. I'm used to it. Some RFPs will place their budget amount in the RFP, and then it doesn't leave anything up to mystery. And everyone knows this is roughly what they're thinking. They're not looking for a $200,000 project. They're not looking for a $10,000 project. They're looking for, say, Cuba City, 30,000. So then everyone kind of knows they're on the same level playing field. If how we judge them, say we put the budget amount in there and we judge them, we have our criteria. If you go back to 07B, the chart at the top of page 6 where it says selection criteria, there's a line item for budget and there's 25 points there. I threw out 25 points because I thought we care about money quite a bit. You know, we want something to be cost efficient. So say we've got 30 grand like Cuba City, and a consultant comes back or the regional planning commission comes back and they say, we'll do it for 25 grand. And then everyone else says, we'll do it for 30 grand. Well, we might give that proposal that said they would do it for 25 grand a higher point score for that line item. So that's one way we could handle the budget, by letting everyone know. Another way is not saying it at all. Now, what consultants will do, because I do this all the time, is then we go look at all the minutes of the different bodies that have approval authority. So if we say we want to request, 30 grand from the American Rescue Plan in the Finance and Personnel Committee, and Troy's probably going to know, he's going to know where to look. I don't know if all the other consultants will know or not, but they'll be hunting, looking for that dollar amount, because they'll want to know roughly what we're thinking. It's a public record. Usually, budgets are published. So one way we could handle it is, if we don't want to say anything about the budget, is we could just not request the money from finance and personnel until we've heard all the responses. So we can handle this in a couple different ways. I don't know the best way to do it, but we have some freedom, is what I'm saying.
In your experience, what's the best way to go?
Well, I think from the perspective of a government, it's probably best not to say, because then you really get a true idea of what they're thinking for cost.
Right.
From the consultant's perspective, it's best to know, because otherwise you're kind of feeling around in the dark. You don't know exactly how much effort they want you to put into this or not.
Well, they can go and look at all the other ones that have been updated in the budget. They can do their own homework.
They can look at this cover sheet.
Right.
It's all
That's
listed out
true.
there.
That's in there.
Would it be, could you lowball it and then wait for the results? In other words, we don't want to exceed $20,000. Looks like this, what it's going to cost us at least, and see what comes back.
According to these county plans, though, that would be a pretty low number.
Sometimes when we, at the firm I'm at, when we see a low ball, we say it's not worth our time.
Right.
They're not ready to spend the money that it takes to get this done. So.
Were you gonna add something?
No, it's been touched on now. So thank you.
So. I
I'm good
don't
with
know.
not putting it in there and seeing what proposals we get. Do you know, I guess I didn't look through close enough on the other RFPs that you had in here. Did they include a budget number?
I know one of them did. It had 80 grand in there. I don't think they all did though. The way some agencies will handle this sometimes too is they'll put out a request for qualifications. It's just a different take on it. They don't say proposals, they say qualifications. Send us your resumes, send us your project experience, but they don't necessarily ask them to write out a scope. Sometimes they think they do, but they don't always ask for a budget. They negotiate the budget afterward. From a government perspective, I want to see kind of what each vendor would charge per hour. What's the hourly rate of these different vendors? Because some could be charging, $200 an hour, and the others might be charging $100, and it'd be kind of good to know, like, well, how much are we paying people per hour? Your quality might be a difference, but at least you know that ahead of time. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. C.
In your discussions with Troy, Did you have any conversation with him about the potential for grants available to the county
So
to fund this?
Supervisor Glassbrenner had worked with him this summer, and we have a document in our June folder. And that was something that, so Mr. Maggie had basically written a kind of a rough scope of what he thought about what we might need. And then he had a column for potential funding for different elements of the plan. So I think he had some idea that maybe they could get some DOT funding for the transportation element. And there was another one where he had some ideas. And there was one, which county was that? One county did that. Is it Sawyer or Bayfield? I can't remember which one it was, but one county had, their regional planning commission did pull in some funds from outside sources to help augment the county's funds.
I
It wasn't-
recall when we did the first comprehensive plan, the bulk of the funding came from grants through Southwest Regional Planning.
Yeah, and it was, he sent me that document. It was $95,000. It was pretty high compared to what we're looking for, but it was, basically creating an encyclopedia about Richland County. We all know.
Well, yes, then it covered all the townships.
I think we've got a lot more to offer now, though, so it shouldn't cost us 95,000. I'm thinking of the land use study or analysis or report that we just received. I mean, that thing is a treasure trove of information about the county. So
What's that one called again, Mr. Brew?
someone help.
The County Land Use Comprehensive Plan?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Came from
Land and,
Melissa Luck.
okay, came from the Land and Zoning Committee. Okay. So what do we want to do about budget? I think we just need to,
Leave it open.
okay,
See what we get.
not designate the budget amount. Should we refer this to finance and personnel just so they can see the costs that are likely coming and basically kind of do a little FYI that we'd like to issue an RFP and get their
Ask the chair.
Well, sure, but we can address it.
I visualize though coming to your meeting, Mr. Chair, then with finance and personnel with the ARPA policy and kind of saying how much do you want to designate for the project, which then kind of might paint exactly what we're trying to avoid. So does that make sense?
but we could just show them this chart here and say, these are the ranges, but we don't know until we issue an RFP. So we just want to give you the heads up that we'd like to get ARPA funding approved by your committee. It's going to be somewhere in this range, and ask if they're opposed to it, because we don't want to go through the RFP process if it's just going to get sent to finance and they're going to say, no, sorry, we're not going to give you any ARPA funding.
Wait, can I ask? I mean, we legally have to do this, right? So we could do it in-house rather than going for an RFP. What would the finance committee say no to is what I'm curious.
Oh, yeah, they could say, well, why don't you just do it internally, or can't we do it on the cheap? I would think they could say that. I think it depends on how useful we want it to be,
If they say that, ask for volunteers.
Yeah, see if any of the county board members want to help us write this.
That's a lot of work.
Okay. Yep, Mr. Seat.
Well, I think that doing it internally, we're overloading our administrative staff as it is. And the question would be, how much more work are we going to load on them?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's advocating for that. I think we're just imagining what if someone says that. So
We're not advocating for it, but it always can happen.
well, this is a pretty big lift. You're talking hundreds of hours on a project like this over the course of a year and, you know, kind of starting from scratch. It'd be nice to get some people with expertise in comp plan writing to help us with this. So maybe my motion still stands as I read it off. Maybe if it just said draft RFP and budget instead of maybe actually take out the word budget. Motion to adopt a draft RFP for an update of the comprehensive plan and refer the RFP to Finance and Personnel Committee for consideration of funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. Maybe that language.
Yeah, I can. Are you making the motion or
Could you?
sec?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion by Glassburner,
Seconded.
second by Fleming. Any further discussion on that motion? Does anyone need it restated? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries, so we'll move forward with that. That takes us to agenda item number 8, strategic plan progress. So Supervisor Glassbrenner had mentioned this to me after the last meeting, looking for an update on this. I thought that was a great idea. We haven't talked about it since June. So now in your folders, you have a few documents. So you've got the cover sheet, which just reminds us of that. We've got 3 attachments now. The cover sheet said 2. So I'll describe what those 3 attachments are. Attachment A is the strategic plan as the county board adopted it. At the very end, there's a blank work plan. Doesn't have anything filled out. Attachment B, 08B. This is the work plan that Mr. Langreck presented to us. Sorry. Are there 2 08Bs? Okay, there are 2 08Bs. So 08B work plan 2 November 22. This is one that Mr. Langreck updated for us yesterday because I gave him the heads up after I sent out the agenda that we were going to have the June one in the folder. And he was so kind as to update it on the spot. But the June one that we last looked at is 08B work plan. So if you're not confused, I don't know how you could be not confused at this point.
B, right? The 08B work plan?
Well, there's 2 of them.
Yeah, I know.
So look for the one with colors.
Yeah.
Folder with
I
colors.
apologize. There was somebody was doing due diligent homework and had it opened at the time that I was going to try to load this one. So then it wouldn't let me just overload and rewrite what was in there.
Okay, so let me hand it off to you now that I've
Sure.
tripped
So
over
I guess
myself.
for brevity's sake, so there's 2 different plans in there rather than trying to really, I don't know who's going to remember from the last meeting on what we had talked about. So for brevity's sake, if you just want to pull up the 08B work plan to November 2022, we'll reference off of that sheet.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, do you want me to kind of go down line by line to kind of talk on the items, or how do you visualize?
Could you give us more of a high level overview and then we can get line by line if anyone has questions?
Sure. So then we'll maybe just take it by streamline organizational structure section, if you want to kind of cue into that on the top. So the first 2 items on the top, we are potentially making traction on through additional requests through finance and personnel in reviewing how we're centralized our services for HR and finance through the response to the resolutions process. So those have recent action on them. We've crossed off the one for the countywide organizational chart that has been prepared by Assistant Dull and is included into the strategic plan. If you have thoughts different to that, then by all means, let me know. And we did change on here then too for write a comprehensive plan to contracted services. It was put in here as rules and strategic planning. Kind of coinciding with what we talked about today, we're looking for potentially more technical type of a service to be able to help us complete that. Is there any questions with that section? Okay. Moving into the next session, improve financial practices. We do have crossed down here to improve county's bond rating. Back from our last Moody's rating that has increased. We've met target on that one. We've missed objectives that we had in place, presumably for 2022, to try to incorporate it into our budget process and trying to tease out some of the different goals from the plan. Hoping to kind of rebound on some of those things going into the 2023 as we hopefully by the time we're setting a 2024 budget that we have a financial plan with more better defined kind of a budgeting process, along with standardized materials that we wanted to see, and try to inject some of these things back into that in preparation for 2024 to try to check the boxes on these in 2023. We did have on here checked off, develop a capital improvement plan, including facilities and equipment. Still, as we talked about, hope to have a more comprehensive approach on that with better definition on the different buildings and infrastructure pieces as we continue to improve on that, but do have it checked off. Is there any questions or concerns in items found underneath improve financial practices? Moving in then to the section for increased coordination. Haven't really touched on a whole lot of these, but would like your input on the bottom one we have here. Coordinate community development and land use decision-making in Richland Center among institutional partners such as Richland County, Richland Center, Richland Hospital, and Richland Local School District. Still have it on here of Rules and Strategic Planning Committee. Not sure on the appropriateness of that, if it should be designated more towards an administrative staff, but again, kind of to try to further clarify that, we're looking for creation of a land use planning working group incorporating these organizations. May change structure document to incorporate into an existing city county kind of a committee, I think is where I was thinking at one point, but I'm still looking perhaps for further guidance and further vision on maybe what the expectations on this item is.
What about the land and zoning committee? Also, what about developing the comprehensive plan, and that has a land use element to it? So maybe it could happen through this committee, through the comp planning process. Just a couple of my thoughts. That way you don't have to get a new committee up and running.
Just trying to, I mean, if we use existing to have expanded meetings where you're trying to bring in partners specific to those types of meetings rather than standing up a independent organization, does that sound like a vision to kind of strive for?
This was just land use decision making in the city of Richland Center. Is that what the intention was from the strategic plan? That's right.
Yeah, it was coordinate community development and land use decision making in Richland Center among institutional partners such as Richland County, Richland Center, Richland Hospital, and Richland Local School District. Well, I will take those thoughts and continue to try to refine this one and bring it back to the next meeting as well. Improve employee pay and HR policies. We have action on the one that you'll see, improved compensation package, i.e. paid benefits or paid time off annually. We've made improvements by made adjustments to the plan with our time off going forward into January with the handbook changes, as well as we've changed our health insurance benefits. There are other ones on here that kind of talk in the realm of compensations, but scratch this one off. If there's problems with that, let me know. Items in maintain investment in workforce and community development. We've had action on several of them. Support and invest in broadband expansion throughout the county. We have found out that our broadband expansion efforts up by Rockridge area has been awarded. We're waiting for those funds then to come to us, and then in working with our partner Laval, there will be an expansion on that broadband infrastructure. Identify financially sustainable use options for the UW campus. That is being developed right now through actions in response to the resolutions. Evaluate financial sustainability on all non-mandated services, and again, visualize that as under development with the responses back to the resolutions. Any questions or concerns in regards to the elements of that section? Support business and attract and retention. I don't have any changes or current actions on those. Improve county identity and marketing. We do have our branding process, which we've been engaged in now for quite a few months. That is kind of nearing its end as we work with a consultant on bringing our branding manual into place and then implementing that. Prioritization on services over services and staffing. Our different strategic focuses at the bottom. Don't have any recent actions on those. Moving into page 3 of your document here.
Can I just ask about the
Yes, sir.
websites? Is that in the 5-year financial plan still, the website, or did that get stricken?
Stand by, I'd have to pull it up if you've got a minute to hold.
You can always get back to me on that too. You don't have to keep going.
Okay, it just opened up here. If you just got another 30 seconds, I can pull it. Save me one less note to follow up on with. Website. Last plan, tech. Website currently is on the financial planning decision worksheet, updated October 26th. We have it in as 2026 element currently.
Okay, thank you.
Resuming our sheet here, let me pull it back up on the screen. Develop a culture of support for employees. Again, we had another bullet on here of increased vacation time for new employees. That is implemented for most of our employees entering into January. No other actions in those on those elements. Improve transparency of county meetings. No action on those elements at the moment. Invest in education of county board supervisors. We've recently had action on and completed, in my opinion, on creating a onboarding folder summarizing expectations for supervisors, as well as support the attendance by new supervisors at major committee meetings such as attending finance and personnel committee, etc. So I have those checked off unless there's feelings that they're not. The 2 that I do have questions for you though is up on the top. We have creation of a mentor program partnering tenured supervisors with new supervisors and hold informational meetings with outside supervisors and their successors to facilitate knowledge transfer. Now, I've got on here to have it earmarked as a vice chair responsibility. That does not fall into our management type of a policy. I don't think we made the additions to put those in there to the best of my recollection and checking it yesterday, but just questions on the appropriateness yet of having that fall onto an individual supervisor.
I was thinking, Mr. Langer, that could just be this committee. And so I reported to this committee on both of those things.
Yep.
Earlier. So
okay,
as chair of this committee, then they can, if they don't like something, they could just have it be different when I report it.
Okay.
Well, it's already done. It already happened.
We did it, yes.
So it's been done.
But I mean, for planning purposes and to keep it in our plan to more appropriately to house it on the committee versus the individual, if that seems like an appropriate.
It's still going to fall on the vice chair because the vice chair is the chair of this committee, but I think it's more appropriate because then it's just not one person, it's a group of 9.
Right. Okay. And then we have on here deepen staff training and leadership and management. I don't have any recent movements on those elements. Mr. Chair.
Okay, any thoughts or questions for Mr. Lang on this update? Well, thanks for preparing it, and I like to see things crossed off lists, so let's just keep crossing things off this list.
I do have a question for you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So I was trying to remember, I had thought we had said somewhere that this was to be reviewed quarterly, so I was trying to find it. And so it was when we initially, and I had it pulled up here, let me see if I can find it. It was Resolution 21-101 when we developed our committee, or when we created the committees to develop the plan and then monitor progress. In that one, it talks about the language of Once the plan is approved, the committee will meet quarterly to monitor progress and report to the county board. So I'm just wondering, like, going forward, like, do we want to set aside months where this will actually be brought to this committee so that we review it, so that it's on a schedule and we're not, have we reviewed it recently? Have we not? And then what does it look like to report progress to the county board? I mean, Administrator Langrek does his updates, and I think he often does refer to the strategic plan. So does that cover it, or do we think that there needs to be something more specific? I do think that it would be helpful once in a while for the county board to actually lay eyes on it, simply because it has been driving forward so much of what we're trying to do. But I wanted to hear the committee's thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you reminded me, because yeah, June, July, August, September, October, 5 months. It's not 3. So let's just start getting it on the agenda, and that's my responsibility. And I apologize. I didn't.
No, it's
remember
okay.
that.
I just thought if we had picked months that we thought were the quarterly, then it's just easy because we'll know that it's on those months.
Well, it's November, so we'll do it again in February and May and so on and so forth. So
Okay.
I think let's just stick with where we're at right now and not try
Okay.
to make up for lost time. I'm happy. What I really like about what Mr. Langrek has done here is I like the crossing off of items.
Mhm.
I like to see, how many items are there in the second column, how many tactics or actions, and how many have been crossed off. So I think if we start going to the county board and we say, we have 6 strategies or however many there are, and we have 30 actions, and we've ticked off 5 of the 30 actions. And these are the ones we've ticked off, and here's your brief update. If you want to know more, go to our folder where we've got information on it. So I'm happy to do something like that at the county board, if that would suffice, or if we should have Mr. Langrek do it. It doesn't matter, but for me, I need to be able to, I'm glad you reminded me, because I need to be thinking this is a top priority of this committee, is we want to basically get as much of the strategic plan as we can get
Well,
done.
right,
in this
because it's a
term.
3-year plan is why I was, yeah. I think that was the original committee's thought, was like, if we're going to make this a 3-year plan and we're going to commit to all of these things, then got to monitor the progress.
Yeah, so Mr. Brewer, would it be okay to have this on the December agenda and just to give like a 1-minute update on where we're at? Okay, so he's nodding his head, so we'll get that taken care of in December, and then that way we're making sure the communication loop is closed with the whole county board. So I very much appreciate that coming from the chair of the strategic planning committee in our last term. So keeping us on track here, which is good.
Just, Mr. Chair, my note would be, at the bottom of this, there could be something down there that's even states when it was reviewed by our committee or updated to our committee, and then when it was to the county board. That way everyone can kind of see the dates and know when it's due, per se.
That's a great idea. Mr. Langrek, would you mind adding that to the just bottom of the chart, and then I'll chat with you afterward too about my idea about numbers.
Does this question for Administrator Langrek, is this, I know you have the strategic plan on the county website. Is the work plan, the updated work plan, does that get posted there as well?
I don't have this one loaded up there. I'd have to check back and see if it's, if we want to have it loaded back in, we can do that. And part of that leads into too, I don't know if there's been formal action on adopting the work plan and how you want to leave that as an administrative document managed by myself and that type of an element, or if you want to formally approve it. There's pros and cons to both, but as far as posting, if it's something that you want posted, we can manage that too.
I guess my question was coming from the aspect of, at what point do we want to update the public on what our progress has been? I know when we were initially developing the strategic plan and looking at other counties' ways of monitoring, there were counties that would have some way of measuring that, where they'd say, this portion, the metrics that they were using to measure that and updating those. And I don't know how frequently they were, or what we'd want to do, but it would be nice to have somewhere on the public portion of this that you know, this is progress that we've made or that we have been updating it. Is my opinion, but I don't know what that looks like.
I like that. I think that's a great idea. I think we could simply say with the crossed off items, we could just type up a brief little update and say we've done these items, you know, for the public and the county board and put that on the website. So it, you know, we were hot to trot on this strategic plan about a year ago, you know, and now we're in the middle of our budget debate about the next 5 years, but they're very tied together. And I like the idea of reminding everyone about this and why are we at the point where we're at? I think the strategic plan is a big part of that.
But you're saying that the actual work plan was not on the website, which I think when if I remember correctly, and I was looking at our resolutions, I believe when we adopted the strategic plan, we called it a living document, which was to include, I believe, the work plan portion of it. So I don't know that we needed a further formal adoption of the work plan. I think that was kind of rolled into the original resolution.
Yeah, I think if we end up adopting it every 3 months, it's going to make us pay attention more. Whenever we have to say we agree with something, it gives us more responsibility and it doesn't just put him out there,
Right.
you know, as the one. So me personally, I am fine with adopting this every 3 months and saying, yeah, we don't disagree with the accuracy of this report. We think this is the right information. So anyone disagree with that approach? You comfortable with it, Mr. Langreich? Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt the work plan as presented by Mr. Langreich today.
I'll second that.
Okay. Second by Glassbrenner. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. All right. We're moving forward with that one. Getting lots of stuff done here. All right. Agenda item number 9, future agenda items. Chair Brewer, do you have any?
I have none.
Okay, Mr. Seep.
Yes, could Mr. Langer give us an update at the next meeting with regard to evaluations of department heads? I know originally he planned to have them done before the last election with the new term, and I know that he's been overloaded with a lot of other impositions by the committees and the board. So
Okay, Mr. Seep, we'll refer that to Chair Brewer for the Finance and Personnel Committee. Mr. Cosgrove. Ms. Gentis? Ms. Glassbrenner?
I apologize. What are we voting on?
Nothing. We're not voting. Do you have any future agenda items?
No, I do not. Thank
Okay.
you.
Ms. Fleming?
None.
Okay, all right, so motion to adjourn. So we're looking for a motion to adjourn to the first Thursday in December.
December 1.
It's the December 1st, all right. So motion to adjourn to Thursday, December 1st at 10 a.m.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by Fleming,
I'll second it.
second by Gentis. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.